Do you see me? All right. Well, welcome to On Ramps Covenant Church's Tuesday night Bible study. I am stepping in for Eric Masfoss, who is off out today. Gotta turn down my sound. And so my name is Barbara Fiske. I'm an elder here and also a life coach and trained in mental health education, specifically regarding trauma healing. And so before we get started tonight, I'd like to start the time with prayer. So God, thank you so much for this opportunity to share about your creation, about us. I thank you for the ways that you've been leading us through the book of Genesis with Eric, showing us how when you created us, you saw it was good. And how Eric's led us through the tension of being sent away from the garden and all of that came with that. So Lord, help us to understand tonight a bit more about trauma and trauma response and the ways that you've wired us and that you've given us the ability to heal. Lord, thank you for this community here that is, it's a group of folks healing its community. And so, Lord, I pray that you bless this time and show us more about how you want us to have you closer to us and to remember that you have our good in mind always. In your name, amen. All right. So I'm going to get started. And just a little bit about myself. I'm a life coach, which means in the state of California, I am not a licensed mental health professional. There may be some folks that are listening or who will see this video later who are, and so that's fantastic. I have been trained regarding some really cool tools with a group of life coaches and Christian counselors and licensed clinical social workers. We work together as a group, an alliance called Clear Thinking Counseling Alliance, and I am the executive director of a nonprofit that we launched called Clear Thinking Solutions. So a lot of the what I'm going to discuss today is from that. We're also a state of California ACEs aware grantee, and so I will be using information from all over the place. And so I've created a document too of what I'm sharing today that I'll be happy to send to you. So feel free to either ask for it in the chat or you can email me and I'll figure out a way to get you that information. All right, so trauma is a word that is being used a lot these days. And some folks think it's being used too much and it's being watered down. And if you've ever wondered about yourself in a situation and didn't have the language to define it, and you came across a title of something that helped you go, oh, that's what I've been feeling. That's what's going on. Well, I'd like us to look at that trauma in that way. So before we talk about the word trauma, I want us to talk about stress. And so if you could see, do you think they could see? Not yet. Okay, I'll describe it to you. Or Eric's absence is felt huge here. So we're going to walk you through things that you may be able to see usually. So there are different types of stress. So as a life coach, oftentimes people come to me and they let me know they do not want to be stressed out anymore. They don't want stress. And it's my job to help them understand that actually we need some stress in our life and help them understand when the stress isn't good. So there's three main types of stress. There's this stress called positive stress. And this is something where there's a life challenge that has happened. Like let's say tonight, as we're all trying to make the online Bible study work, or whatever it took for you to get here tonight. If you had to like leave different events or finish work on time or make dinner, those all could be positive stresses. Applying for a job, starting school, those could be positive stresses. These are things that elevate your heart rate and, it releases stress hormones, but you're able to respond well to it afterwards, and you can get grounded fairly easily. Another type of stress is called tolerable stress. So this is usually more serious, It's a temporary stress response, and it's buffered by supportive relationships. And so this is really important to understand. So a tolerable stress could be something as tragic as a car accident. The reason why it's tolerable, though, is because you have supportive folks around you. So people that you can call on for help, people who can check in on you, who could ask you how you feel, and just to help you understand that what you went through was stressful, and they're checking in to see if you are okay. And so there's many things that happen in our life because we're humans that are tolerable stress. What's key is what makes it tolerable is the seriousness of it on our minds and our bodies. It's buffered by supportive relationships. The next type of stress is called toxic stress. This is prolonged activation of stress response systems in the absence of protective relationships. So this could be anything that's overwhelming to our own person, and we are for whatever reason we're having to deal with it alone, either literally because we are alone or for whatever reason we have not reached out to get help. um, and so this could be because of, for example, of a abusive relationship, and because of shame or maybe survival you don't ask for help. And so what's the reason this becomes toxic is because that stress response on your mind and your body starts to harm your mind and your body. And when we experience a toxic stress situation, our brain starts to, and our body does things to avoid that situation in the future. And so we will be responding in the future based on this unresolved stress that we went through. Does that make sense so far? All right, great. So let's talk about the word trauma now. So trauma is a very old word. It's a Greek word for wound. It is the response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event which overwhelms an individual's ability to cope and think. It causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes the sense of self, and the ability to feel the full range of emotions and experiences. So when somebody goes through a traumatic response, they are not able to handle it the way they normally do in life. And it will impact the processing of the past, the present, and the future. And this is really important. So trauma is not an event. Um, so, for example, Allison and I could experience a car accident, and because of whatever our past experiences were, or whatever happened in that car accident, I um, I may come out of that really, really shaken, like having panic attacks, anxiety, not being able to sleep. And Allison may be able to, like, go get checked out, maybe see a chiropractor, and just, like, heal from her bruises and bumps. But I've experienced something different. And because I've experienced something so, for whatever reason, so overwhelming for me, I am now changing my lifestyle to avoid that kind of stress again. So, a traumatic response is an individual's response to a serious event, but we don't all respond the same. And so, a lot of the current training, especially in California, regarding responding to trauma is being forefronted by the state of California. We have our first Surgeon General. Her name is Nadine Burke Harris, and she is really pushing that campaign for us to understand this as a state. Because when we experience toxic stress and we experience trauma that's not dealt with and cared for, it affects us individually, but also as a community. It affects our health, it affects our lifespan, it affects the choices that we make. And so it's really important to kind of understand what trauma is and how and what we can do to respond to it. I have a quote here I'll share. It's from Bessel van der Kolk. He's the author of The Body Keeps the Score. And he says, "We have learned that trauma is not just an event that took place sometime in the past. It is also the imprint left by that experience on mind, brain, and body. This imprint has ongoing consequences for how the human organism manages to survive in the present." So if you have had a trauma response that trauma response, because it's your brain and your body want to protect you, it is going to be affecting how you respond to everything around you. In some ways, it won't be as noticeable, but other ways it'll be very noticeable. And so this is, now that we have an understanding of trauma and trauma response and stress, I'd like to share with you a little bit about adverse childhood experiences. So there was a study, a landmark study done in 1998. And so I think I can control this. Here we go. By the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention and Kaiser Permanente. And so there was these doctors that had patients that had that were suffering from things like diabetes and heart problems, and they had a segment of their patients that were not responding to medication, or they would do everything they needed to do to become healthier, and then they would relapse. And the doctors were really looking to identify why those patients were not getting better, and they from talking with the patients, they realized that these particular patients, had survived various traumatic experiences when they were especially younger. So in this amazing study, they studied like 17,000 people, that were in their, like, they were all working adults with insurance through Kaiser HMI in the 90s, if you can imagine. So they're all middle class. Most of them, I think it was like 70% of them had a college education, primarily Caucasian. And what they did is they asked them to answer this survey to understand if there was a strong correlation between adverse childhood experiences and adult mental and physical illnesses. And they found a very, very strong correlation. So from this study, and there's been research that's been built up on this study since then, since 1998, that by every state in the nation, and especially on the federal level, to understand this more. So let me explain what we mean by adverse childhood experiences. So currently in California, if your children are on Medi-Cal, their pediatrician may be asking you as a caregiver or parent to look at this list of issues that a child may experience. And they will ask the parent or the caregiver to look at the list. There's 10 things on this list, and ask them if this child has experienced any of them. Now, the doctor's office is not going to ask about which one. They just want to know a number. So out of 10, they'll ask, has your child experienced 0 or 1 or 3? And based on that number, then the pediatrician office can do many things. So these are the different categories. There's 3 different categories of adverse childhood experiences: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. So under abuse, the concerns are, was there physical abuse, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse? Under neglect, was there physical neglect or emotional neglect? And then household dysfunction, was anybody in the house, did anybody in the house suffer from a mental illness, had been incarcerated? Was the mother treated violently? Was there substance abuse? And was there divorce? So if you heard that list, if you just keep in mind how many of those pertain to you, and that would be your ACE score. So if none of those things pertain to you from when you were a child, 18 years and younger, then you have an ACE score of 0. If 5 of them pertain to you, then you have an ACE score of 5. Does that make sense? Okay. So it's really important as I go on to know that this score does not define you. It is a tool that we are using to understand what's going on possibly in your mind and your body. All right. So if you have an ACE score of 1 or above, you've survived much. And so that is not to be discounted. So what they found from this research is that ACEs can have a lasting effect on us and the community. So it affects our health. It can lead to diabetes, obesity, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, and broken bones. It could have lasting effects on behavior, such as smoking, alcoholism, and drug use. And it can have lasting effects on life potential, graduation rates, academic achievement, lost time for work. And again, this is just to remember, this is like a correlation. So the number of ACEs that you have increases the chances of you having some of these adverse effects. So for example, if you had an ACE score of 4, I'm really bad with percentages and stuff, but your suicide ideation increases by 1,200%. So that, uh-huh. So it's just, it's just important to keep that in mind. This is all correlations, this is all statistics. Now, the reason why an ACE score affects us is because when we were a child, even if we were an infant, and we experienced something traumatic and we did not have some buffering assistance with that, and I'll get into that in a moment, then our mind and our body, to help us survive, created these it decided in order to keep us safe, it was not going to do certain things and it was going to avoid other things. And so that can cause isolation, and it can also stunt the growth and understanding that you're safe. And so therefore you could mature regularly, mentally and physically. And so I won't get into all of the science of that, but there's a lot of really cool science there. And again, I'm share all the links of all this. This next slide is a pyramid of, the idea is, depending on your ACE score, how this will affect you. So we're going to, instead of starting at the bottom, I'm going to start at the top. If you can imagine the pyramid top. So a higher ACE score correlates to an early death. And then the next row below that would be, it can cause higher instances of disease, disability, and social problems. Below that line is an adoption of health risk behavior. So doing risky behavior, things that you don't care so much about the consequences because of the moment. Below that would be social, emotional, and cognitive impairment that's caused by having adverse childhood experiences. Below that, the base of that is because there's a disruptive neurodevelopment that occurs because of the adverse childhood experiences. Now, the next two lines are social conditions and local context. So this is an important part of understanding ACEs and its impact on our community, because it's not just what happens in the household. It's also what happens in the community around the person, the family. And then below that is generational embodiment and historical trauma. So especially in our nation, probably in every nation in the world, but especially in our nation, we have undealt with generational embodiment of trauma and historical trauma. And that affects us now to this day as individuals and community. And so that attributes to higher ACE scores. So I didn't find the statistic before I came tonight, but so communities of color tend to have statistically higher, individuals have higher ACE scores within those communities because of the lack of equity and injustices that occur, and historically. So this next slide says ACEs can echo across generations. And the slide says the consequences of ACEs can be passed down from one generation to the next if children don't have protective buffers like positive childhood experiences or a caring adult in their lives. Also, when families experience historical and systemic racism or living in poverty for generations, the effects of ACEs can add up over time. So research on this started with research on families who survived the Holocaust, but there's now a lot of research, and there's research going on regarding American Blacks who come from slavery, generations of slavery. And so what they were able to document based on, this is just amazing. This is all because science has been able to read these things and see these things in the last 30 years. So just taking a little bit of step back and giving a very short lesson on this. So all of us have DNA, and all of our DNA is different. Mine is unique and different from yours. And so when So that's fine. And so when I have children, my child has some of my DNA and some of my husband's DNA. So that's pretty common knowledge, right? So what scientists have been able to see is that there's these proteins on the DNA, and these proteins attach to the DNA um, when there's been a traumatic experience. And these proteins, it's kind of like what they do is they tell the DNA, certain parts of the DNA, you're not going to respond this time, or you're not going to do that thing. Even this is part of your DNA. For your survival, we have learned that this is not going to be turned on for you. And 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 through the science of generation, or the research of looking at these different generations, they can see that that kind of protein attached to DNA is passed up to 5 generations. And anytime during those 5 generations that somebody realizes, oh, I have been responding a certain way that is like more of a coping mechanism, and it's not the healthiest, but I can see now how, that's helped me survive, and they change their ways and they heal, it the protein drops off the DNA, and it benefits the people around them, because we as humans benefit from something called neuroplasticity. So as I am on my journey and walking, I mean, and healing, the people around me are affected by that, because we're community. And as God heals me, it affects the people around me for whatever reason. So it could be, I mean, honestly, like, let's say if I used to be a very anxious person. And so you knew me as a very anxious person, how you engaged with me, knowing that you're going to engage with Barbara as a very anxious person, you had to engage a certain way, right? You had to have boundaries, had to figure out how you were going to respond to me. But as I maybe became less anxious and more grounded and more confident and more assured, and I was even able to maybe return in friendship in that relationship, that affects you as an individual. So you could see how that neuroplasticity, that healing in me, can heal you. And so that's also what we know about this epigenetics is what it's called, the healing of the traumatic proteins tags on DNA. So that's incredibly encouraging. I find that incredibly encouraging. I don't have a slide made for this, but there's some books that are pretty common right now that got this information from. So to learn more about ACEs, you could read our Surgeon General, Dr. Nadine Burke Harris's book, The Deepest Well, and it's a really easy read, and she goes into a lot of the science in the way that you can understand. So it's called The Deepest Well. To learn more about racialized trauma and the black, white, as well as he calls it blue bodies, so those in law enforcement, you could read a book called My Grandmother's Hands by Resma Menikin. And then something that we will discuss more here at On Ramps as time goes on, to understand more about secondhand trauma. And secondhand trauma is when you are walking along somebody else, and because of their trauma and you caring for them, your body and your mind are responding to that. And you are affected also. If you're not aware of that, um, then it could be really discouraging. And you might actually leave the, let's say if you're a teacher, you may actually leave teaching, or leave being a nurse, or leave all of these things, because you don't realize that you are getting the effects of secondhand trauma. And as defense mechanisms, you're becoming exhausted and numb and maybe bitter and cynical, and you no longer see the hope or feel the passion that you once did. So a great book to read about that is called Trauma Stewardship, and it's by Laura Van Dernoot-Lipsky. All right, so thank you for letting me walk you through some of that heavy negative stuff. I want to share with you some good news now. So all of this research that's been done since 1998 around ACEs, what they found is that there's something called buffering supports, or counter ACEs. And this is all very much correlation, if you understand that kind of research, but it's very strong. So they know that if there is one caring adult in a child's life, and it doesn't have to be throughout the child's life, during the child's life, especially around times of trauma, if there is one caring adult that sees them and hears them, that child knows that they're cared for, that counters the toxic stress. And that is incredibly good news for us. So that means that as we learn about ACEs and how it's affecting our community regarding adults having, mental health issues, heart issues, lung issues, everything, diabetes, we know that if we can, at a young age, counter and help educate parents and caregivers and communities to be aware of what ACEs are, adverse childhood experiences, and we could help mitigate those either through education or supports, but we can actually step in and care for our children in a way that they're able to have that buffer, and their mind and their body does not suffer the way it would if they didn't have those supports. So that's the exciting news. So there's another survey that's also asked, hopefully by pediatricians, but I'm going to ask it here. I'm going to read it aloud to you. There's different surveys, but they're all about this idea of, was there somebody in your life when you were young that was there for you? And this one is called the Benevolent Childhood Experiences Scale. So the questions, there's 10 of them, just to kind of match the 10 questions from ACEs, or at least the numbers. So it says, when you were growing up during your first 18 years of life, so if you can keep this in mind, did you have at least one caregiver with whom you felt safe? Did you have at least one good friend? Did you have beliefs that gave you comfort? Did you like school? Did you have at least one teacher who cared about you? Did you have good neighbors? Was there an adult, not a parent, caregiver, or the person from number one, who could provide you with support or advice? Did you have opportunities to have a good time? Did you like yourself or feel comfortable with yourself? And number 10, did you have a predictable home routine, like regular meals and a regular bedtime? So it's really, I find really cool about this list is that, so I have an ACE score of 6, which is pretty high. But I can answer yes to many of these questions, and especially number 10. Did you have a predictable home routine, like regular meals and a regular bedtime? Now, because my parents own childhood trauma, they provided us a home and food and clothing and a predictable schedule. They did not know how to provide us with affection. So I felt very much neglected emotionally. And so, but they provided with us way more than what they had as children. And number 10 addresses that. Did I have a predictable home routine, like regular meals and regular bedtime? I did. And it took me a while to understand that was the way they loved me. They provided these things for me. And my mind and my body understood that, even if I, especially during my teenage angst, did not understand that. And so here at On-Ramps, our vision statement says, we are the healed becoming the healers. And our mission statement says, a healing community, healing its community. So as we at On-Ramps do these things, and the ways that we love our children and walk with our youth and provide ways to connect with each other, we are doing these things for children as well as us healing adults. All right, any questions? I've shared a lot about these things so far. Any thoughts, any questions? No? Shantae, yeah, thanks.
You briefly mentioned secondhand trauma, so I want to know if you have like a resource to learn more about it or a book.
Yeah, this book called Trauma Stewardship is excellent, and she adds humor to it too. And I highly recommend it. So she lists things that you may have experienced either at work or in community. Things like I listed cynical, so I'm going to pick on I'm not going to pick on anybody, but if you're if you're in a certain group of folks where when you go to the break room, everybody's always complaining. They're just complaining. Like it's just complaining. If their shift changes, if they're working in a place where shifts are different, like it doesn't matter what the shift is, they're going to complain. If the supplies they wanted came in and but other supplies didn't. They're kind of in a rut. Like everything's exhausting, and it could be for real. Like everything's exhausting. They don't have all that they need. They're overworked and such. But it's really hard for them to turn off that complaint. And when they go home, they have a hard time relaxing, and they stop doing the things that they used to do that brought them joy. So they might not go out with friends because they're tired. They might not go do the fun things anymore because they don't see the reason for it. Like it really starts to change their perspective. So her book uses humor to walk us through that, as well as um, gives us a good understanding of like kind of things that we may not have noticed. So things like loss of appetite, things of like either you can't sleep or all you do is sleep. So things that are very common to us as people. So I recommend that book. Mm-hmm. Okay, so trauma isn't positive, but positive stress would be. And so that would be something that you are worried about, you're a bit anxious about. So like today, this morning, I get a text. I get a text that says, "Hey, Pastor Eric is out sick. Can you step in for him tonight?" And I thought, "Oh shucks!" Like, oh shoot. I thought, oh yeah. And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, I could step in tonight. But I was like, I had no. That's when I was asked was this morning, and so immediately my brain went, oh, of course, especially since leadership helped me. They said, can you please present what you just presented to the staff just a couple weeks ago or last week, and so that was wonderful. That gave me a timeout. But I felt that stress immediately. Like I'm sure my heart rate went up, and I thought, okay, what is my schedule today? Like, what do I have time to prep and things like that? And so that would be a form of positive stress, or yeah, any. Yeah. Oh boy, here we go. Yes. Like interviewing for a job. Like in this day, to get an interview is a big deal. Like you apply. So somebody calls you and says, "Can you come in and do an interview?" That's probably going to get your heart rate going. Especially during the pandemic, you're going, "Okay, what am I going to wear?" Like maybe haven't had to dress up nice for a while, and so or a new relationship. Like if you're dating, that would be positive stress. Things that make you go, "Oh my gosh!" Like give you some stress. And so, but it could be even doing something and failing. So taking a test and getting a bad score. That actually can lead to positive stress when you realize, oh, I didn't study that. And I can see how I could do better next time. So you get to grow from it. It's a challenge you have that you get to grow from. All right. Any other questions?
I was saying for me, since I don't do this at all, I wanted to do it because I thought it would be a good experience for me. And I was just hoping that people would be forgiving of any mistakes I made. But I also felt like the go live, and when that moment I was like, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going live. But it's good for me.
Oh yeah. So Maddie, so I'm not on the screen, right? Oh, I am? Or people are seeing me? Oh, see, check this out. So this was a big deal. So when we first started, people weren't seeing me. So I thought I was just audio. I'll sit up straighter now. And so, but yeah, so Maddie, I asked this morning, who's going to be taking care of the tech? And you said, oh, that you will. And I said, oh, great. And so you and Allison, you said, so yeah, those are examples of positive stress. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Martha has a question. So Martha needs the mic.
Hold on, I'm taking a picture of me and Maddie. Thanks for your patience, Martha.
Anytime.
So practically, for instance, like if you're in education or whatever job field you may be in,
w- apart from like obvious, like I guess what are obvious signs, but as a person who is leading or just working, existing, if you come in contact with someone who is needing that kind of support, what are practical ways to serve them, but also inquire? You know what I mean? Like as a teacher, I'm like, okay, clearly this student has some trauma, but I'm not going to just be like, you have trauma. Let's talk about this, right? But like practical ways. Because I know this information is helpful, but at least in the education system, there's no real training to say, hey, you've experienced XYZ. And teachers are like, just get it together. If I did it, you can do it too. And that's not okay.
Oh, I
So,
totally agree with you, Martha. Yes.
practicals
So yes,
for
that was a perfect segue into what I'm going to talk about next. So there's this concept called trauma informed care. Have you heard of this? It's kind of like it's all the rave in professional development these days. Trauma informed care. You might be going to some sort of workshop on trauma informed care. What that means is that you are understanding your own trauma response and what you've gone through and how you respond to trauma. And I'll go more into that so that you can use that to have empathy and understanding and even an objective view for those that you're interacting with. So trauma informed care ideally would be like if you went to the doctor's office, you would be greeted warmly. People would be giving you allowances for whatever you might need, like, instead of a sense of rush. Or a teacher may be given the time to slow down and go, what is it that you need? I noticed this about you. What is it you need? You need to sit are you thirsty? Hey, I have a snack for you. You need a snack. So trauma informed care is this idea of being able to see the person where they're at because of your understanding of where you're at. And you're able to do that. And so we need trauma informed care in all sectors of our community. We need it in education sector because what that communicates too, if a teacher is able to feel comfortable doing that, that means they are also supported by their administration to do that. So for somebody at a front desk at a doctor's office to be able to say, hey, how are you doing? Do you need anything? I have water for you right here. Like I remember I went to go get this is the beginning of the pandemic, and I needed to go in for some labs, and they took my temperature, and it was high, but it was also like 104 in Fresno. And so they said, and I really needed to get these labs. And it was beginning of the pandemic, and it's not as if things are easier now, but it was a little stressful going out to go get these labs. And so this person said to me, hey, I have a seat here under the air conditioner. Can you want to sit under there for about 10 minutes? Do you need some water? I mean, I wish this on any, I was so grateful for this interaction that this person, I don't know if they did it on their own or if that was the culture of that particular office. So I sat there for 10 minutes and I drank water. And of course my temperature went down because I wasn't sick. I was just hot because I had rushed over from a different appointment in a hot car that wasn't too far away. So my hot car couldn't cool me down before I got to this next appointment. And they were following protocol and took my temperature. And according to the temperature, I shouldn't be allowed in. But so that's trauma-informed care. And so that it seems small, but what was really important is they saw me and they were able to engage with me at where I'm at. That healing of seeing somebody and them being seen. So what I have on the screen right now is for adults especially, but this works all the way, of course, down to children and families and communities. These are the evidence-based buffering interventions. And so I grabbed this from the state of California, but if you Google this, you'll find it. Other people have different cute little circles and infographics all the way up to the federal level. And so these are called stress busters or anti ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. You can imagine like this. These are things to counter your physical and your mental response to trauma. But these are good for all of us, no matter what our ACE score is, because what happens is these things that I'll walk us through, they prepare our mind and our body to feel safe and healthy. So when stressful things come our way, our ability to respond is different than if we're exhausted and stressed and overwhelmed. So I'm going to go around the circle, I'm going to start with supportive relationships. So again, these are people that see you and love you for who you are, who aren't always trying to fix you and aren't having high expectations. This is not somebody who like, depending on where you work or relationships you have, where you feel like you have to perform to get approval. So supportive relationships, really important. And often we have to be very intentional to have those. So I got to tell you, I'm a lazy friend. I'm just going to admit it. I'm a lazy friend. I am. There's a group of women that I get together with regularly for now over 15 years, and I've never instigated the time we get together, but somebody else in the group does. And so these friends have been through so much with me, and they are my supportive relationships. But they know me enough too to call me out, and because all my friends have been trained in this stuff too, they try not to fix me, but they ask me really good questions about what I may be putting my hand to. So supportive relationships, and it doesn't have to be intense. It just means that maybe you come to a gathering or a Bible study where people know you and they're giving you the benefit of the doubt, and you can come and be you. All right, so quality sleep is the next one. So this is really, really important. If you do not get enough sleep, it's as if you drank a lot of alcohol. So in our house, we have the rule because we had older teenage drivers. If you got less than 5 hours of sleep, you were not allowed to drive, and you would need to ask one of us parents to get a ride, as if you needed a ride home from a party because you had been drinking. So if you got 3 hours of sleep because you were working on that college project or got no hours of sleep, the rule in our house was then you asked for a ride or you paid for Uber or you called a friend, or if you could walk to the bus stop, but you did not get in the car to drive. So quality sleep, and this can be elusive. This can take some time to get. So in my world, my neck back went out in the end of November, and I started seeing a chiropractor and a physical therapist, and I learned that I was out of alignment, and I have been suffering from bad sleep for over a year. I did not know it was because of that. So I've been getting some pretty good sleep lately. So next is balanced nutrition. This is really important for us as adults, but if you think for little ones especially, they need balanced nutrition. Like malnutrition affects their development physically and of course mentally. Physical activity, can be tough, especially during the pandemic and depending on where you live and stuff, but to take into account that your body needs to move and needs to exercise and such. Mindful practices, I'm going to go over a few of these, but mindfulness practices. Mindfulness means that you're taking a moment to focus on being present. And so whatever that means for you, being present. So I have ADHD. And so mindfulness for me is not going to be sitting down and having no thoughts, of being quiet and having an empty brain. That is not, because it's not going to happen. So when I do this contemplative form of worship called centering prayer, the idea is you think about this phrase that helps you bring you back to this moment of prayer. And so I usually use the word shalom. And so if your mind wanders and has a thought and you remember that you're in centering prayer, you think, I say to myself, shalom, and it brings me back to this moment of prayer. So if I spend 2 minutes or 20 minutes, the entire time my mind is wandering and I'm remembering shalom and coming back. I have never experienced a time of emptiness and quietness and stillness. I'm sure it's great for those who have, but that's just, that's not me. So something I do, because I work from home and I spend a lot of time on Zoom with clients and meetings and such, is I will step outside and go into my wandering garden, and hopefully the flowers are growing taller than the weeds, and so, or I'll walk down and admire the landscaping of my neighborhood. I will intentionally look at my urban environment and admire nature so that I could be present in the moment, which is incredibly healing for my body and my mind, to not worry about the past or the future, but to be present here. Or in my practice with as a life coach, I get to focus on the other person, and that's perfect for me. So that helps me stay in the present. So the next one is access to nature. And this, like many of these things, this is an equity issue, especially here in Fresno. We do not have a lot of green space in South Fresno. I mean, if you were here at the church and you wanted to go experience green space, you'd have to go for a walk. You'd have to, fortunately, we have a couple of parks within a couple of blocks, really small little pocket kind of parks, the Cultural Arts Center and then Dickey Playground. But it's not like avenues of green space that much of our city enjoys, or larger parks where there's trails and stuff. We do not have that here. It's not easy access. But to go out like tonight and admire the moon and look at the stars, that is a form of access to nature, and that is healing for us. And then the last part of this this wheel is mental health care. And again, this is important to realize. So I'm a life coach, and a lot of people don't know what that is. And life coaches were primarily used by corporations to help like their C-level CEO type of folks get better at what they do. And so I do that too. But I also get to be a coach and walk alongside people in on their journey in life. And I refer and recommend licensed mental health professionals to my clients or to others because it's really good to be with somebody who understands how to listen really well and ask you some good questions to help you be you. And so there's a lot of stigma, especially in communities of color, regarding getting mental health care. And there's a lot of distrust that has happened over the years, especially in the education system. So this is an equity issue too, to be aware of that and how may we need to communicate resources to folks so that they'll take the opportunity to use them. Okay, so I'm looking at the time, and I'm going to give you some helpful things. So first of all, I've done a lot of talking, and if this was in like a regular training or webinar and such, we would have done some things to relax and such, or to let go of the stress. So we've all been sitting here for a while. I've been sitting here for a while talking, but one of the things I want to leave with you is understanding what you can do in the very moments of when you're stressed, when you're feeling stressed out. And so the first thing that's not on the slide, it refers to it, is the idea of deep breathing. So deep breathing means that you're taking in a deep breath down, like a deep breath that feels like you're going down into your belly, not upper chest breathing. And you're taking a deep breath, and then you're exhaling in a way that feels like you're using your diaphragm to breathe it out. And you want to do this slowly. And the reason why you want to breathe like that, and you could hold it, you could take a deep breath in, hold it, exhale long, hold it, is because when that limbic system kicks in, that I haven't described during this time, or your survival mode kicks in, oxygen is deterred away from most of your body, or most of your brain, like the front part of your brain, so that you could respond quickly in case of danger. So you could respond in fight, flight, or freeze. And when you take those deep breaths, you bring oxygen back into all of your brain so that you could be present again and make a wiser decision. And so there's other things that you could do when you're stressed out, or when you've been triggered and such. There's adrenaline and cortisol that is released into your body, and it starts here in the upper part of your spine. And this is why my neck went out. I had an incredibly stressful life, 2021, and I think my body was just done with it by the end of November, and my neck went out. And it wasn't because of an accident. I didn't pull anything. I was actually at a concert. I was at a concert, and I had my hands up, and then it just started aching. By the next day, I was immobile. Like I couldn't turn my head. I couldn't turn most of my body. It was crazy, and it was because of the tension and not being aware of it. So rolling your shoulders is a great way. Rolling your head slowly is a great way to break that up. Standing up, walking around are all good things to do. Singing along with worship or any other music that you really enjoy is also a great way to relieve that tension and counter the toxic stress. I'm looking at the time, and I want to be very mindful of that. Any questions so far about those things? So 5 senses, anything that helps you be present. So you can use your 5 senses. You can take a moment to wonder what you hear, what you see, what are you feeling, what can you smell and taste. You do these, any of these type of things throughout the day, it will help you be in the present and help you deal with the stresses that are on your plate for that day. Okay. What I'd like to share with you now is this idea of when you're in stress, under stress, or if you have a toxic stress response or traumatic stress response, it really colors the way that you see everything and how you respond to everything. And so there's this idea of these 4 states of mind. There's the first one is you're really, because of protection, there's coping mechanism. It's called resignation. And you're really withdrawn. You have no strength, you have limited viewing ability, and you feel hopeless. The next type of state of mind that's a little bit more engaging, but still you're not fully okay with everything around you, is this idea of rejection. So you often have a high reactivity, meaning you respond, you are in defensiveness. It feels like you have strength, but it's coloring how you interact with everybody and how you view other people responding to you. The third step up, closer to being less stressed, but still responding in a stressful way, is called toleration. And this is where I find I'm in often. So you feel like you have strength in the situation. You feel like you're all right. If people ask you how you're doing, you feel like you're fine. But there's also these thoughts of, as long as everything falls into place, I'll be okay. As long as they do what they said they were going to do, as long as I get to get this done, as long as I meet this deadline, as long as the money comes in when I need it, everything's okay. And when our expectations aren't met and we lose it, we realize that we weren't in this place of being grounded and being present, that we were under tension that was just ready to be triggered. And all of these things, different states of mind that I just shared with you, they all have a physical response, meaning that we will feel it, the tension in our bodies. So to become aware of how you feel in your body is a great way to understand where you may be mentally in that moment. The fourth state of mind is something that that we in the counseling world, mental health world, call acceptance. And so let me define this word for you, because it's really important to define it. Acceptance does not mean that you're a welcome mat that people could walk on. Acceptance means that you are able to be present and see the facts in front of you, whether they're negative, terrible, horrific, great, whatever. That are the facts. Like, you are able to be strong enough and see the facts. And when you are able to see the facts, then you're able to look at them and make a wise decision next. So that's what we mean when we talk about being in a place of acceptance. That is the place we want to be in, because that's when we get to be all of who we are, and we get to be we get to decide if we need more information, or if we're going to move forward, or if we're going to stop, or if we're going to ask for help. That's the place that we want to be in. And that's part of the healing journey that we're all on too. And so, to wrap it up, I just want to share with you that, so Maddie, is there a way for me to communicate, like, if people want more of this information, or if they want me to send? I could put it on the On-Ramps family page on Facebook. Would that be good? Okay, great. Because this last slide, this was a slide about acceptance. This last slide that I want to share with you is a tool that that we use in the Clear Thinking Counseling Alliance, and it's so much of what I've discussed, but it's something that you could do by yourself in your mind pretty quickly, and it's called the 4-step clear thinking method. And the first thing you do is you notice, but if you want to participate in it right now, as I walk you through it, you can. If you can think of something that's annoyed you, that hasn't gotten you really angry, but just something that's like a pet peeve that happened maybe recently, just one incident. And then as you think about it, notice the tension you feel in your body. But because your limbic system was engaged and you're actually annoyed or bothered or upset, your limbic system is engaged and you have some kind of tension going on in your body. So if you could look at yourself, imagine what you look like, use that part of your brain to imagine what you look like with that tension and staying in it. What if you stayed feeling that way for the next hour? Then if you could put that picture down and look at yourself, accepting, again, remembering accepting means to look at the facts. You're able to look at the facts in front of you about the situation. And just whether you make a decision about what to do or not next, just look at the facts. And then take a moment and notice any change in tension in your body. And so this is something that we could do at any time to help us be aware that we're getting stressed out and to kind of ground ourselves in the moment. And then trust that as we lower our tension, and breathing is like the fastest way to lower your tension. Trusting that instead of pushing through and trying to do some sort of action through that emotion, instead of being aware that your brain is and body are trying to protect you right now, but this is not the time to make a decision. You want to lower your tension first and then be in a place where you could see your options before taking a step. Any questions about that? Follow it with me. This is something that I'd love to help people walk through. It took me actually a long time to do myself because I didn't feel the tension in my body. I'd ignored it and I couldn't visualize myself. And so I was really good at not looking at the facts and pushing through an emotion and trying to either flee from it or fight through it. And so, but it's completely changed my life and it's been very helpful. So yeah, so thank you for letting me share with you these things. It wasn't a regular Bible study, and I got to tell you from my perspective, this is creation that I got to share with you, and understanding the science behind how God has made us is very much part of understanding how God cares for us, and He's put us in community so that we could care for each other, and to know that it is good to learn more about us first as we are walking the journey with others, like as we become aware of what's going on with ourselves and pursue healing, whether that's in community or with a professional or with a group of friends, then we know that's going to benefit the kingdom of God, and the community around us, and so on. All right, so it's 7:33. Is it okay if do we have any questions? Nope. Any other questions? You guys have been so gracious. Thank you so much. Yeah. Is it okay if I close this in prayer? All right. God, thank you for creating us, God. And thank you for these ways that you're calling us to slow down and be aware of things that I think the ancients knew. Like, I think people knew what it meant to not be anxious and what it meant to slow down and what it meant to stop and admire the flowers and consider the lilies and the sparrows, because people were more in tune with how they responded to stress, knowing that they didn't notice these things when they were stressed out. And Lord, thank you for the way that you walk us through all these stories in the Bible of people experiencing traumatic things and how your redeeming love and your care is present to you. And so thank you for wanting that for us here, that this is not, there's no shame involved in acknowledging that we're human and that we have these stress responses, and they're not always gracious and lovely, and they can be very hurtful. And thank you for the way that our brains don't just get broken at all, that you allow healing, and that healing for us is healing for those around us and our community too. Lord, thank you for ways that you will bring us into more healing. And so regarding especially generational trauma, historical trauma, especially in the context of where we are here in Lowell and Fresno at this time. And so Lord, we ask that you bless everybody who's listening, that you give us safe travels home. In your name, amen.